Matchmaker, matchmaker, make me a match. Find me a find, catch me a catch. Matchmaker, matchmaker, look through your book and make me a perfect match.
Hi, and welcome to episode 9 of West End Talks. So we've had the TV last night with Tim Wilson from The Circle, but we're back to West End, and for the first time, Broadway. We're going across the pond. We've had an American before we get comments, but we're going across the pond to Broadway. She's had her West End debut, she's had Broadway, so tonight we have Alexandra Silber. You'll know her from shows like she had her West End and professional debut as Laura Fairley in The Women in White. She played Hodo in the West End production, 2007 production, because we have had a production since, of Fiddler on the Roof. She played Julie Jordan in the West End production of Carousel, and that then led to her US debut in the revival of Carousel in Los Angeles. Her Broadway debut was in Masterclass, and she then played Scythe in Broadway's run of Fiddler on the Roof. So she's done it twice in 2 different characters. So we'll talk about that and lots more throughout the evening. So let's welcome Alexandra.
I'm so happy to be here. Hi!
Thank you very much for joining us. It's a genuine thrill.
Oh, Graham, it's my thrill. I'm so always happy to be and to talk across the pond.
Across the pond, yes, you're across, because you're actually in California at the moment. We should make that aware to
so
the viewer.
I guess I'm across the continent and the pond.
Yes,
I'm in California at my brother's house. Yes, exactly. My brother just has more space than my 750 square foot apartment in New York City. So we escaped for the summer to just quarantine out here. That's
a good yes. Lots more space is better than a small. Yes, you could have
Indeed.
gone a bit mad.
Places here when there's more space.
Yes, definitely. You don't go as mad. Definitely. That's how I found I've got a decent sized house, and I'm like, yes, that helped.
Still,
definitely.
I know.
So thank you very much for joining us.
How do we get started?
So we started for 2, and as all West End Talks fans know, it's the same 2 questions we ask everybody. And the first one is quite simply, what got you into performing?
Wow. I think I have a very common story that a lot of people that end up being performers or artists of any kind have, which is I grew up in a household that was just filled with music and filled with cast albums and movie musicals and a real love of the theater, a love of the arts, but also of music and ballet. And my mom's a visual artist still to this day. So just a real appreciation for the arts as a huge part of being a person in the world, which I think is not necessarily always a common story. And I think one of the things that I actually think the UK embodies is that sometimes people's relationship to music and performance and storytelling is through folk music, is through work songs, is through is when it's incorporated more into everyday life. And this, of course, is a different kind of thing. So I guess I started, I was a little baby ballerina at 4 years old, going to the local ballet place, and really enjoyed it, found it to be a great discipline. I loved the technique. I loved the ability to express myself. I discovered very early in my development that I could sing at a high level. I think I might have been 7 or 8 years old. And it's one of those things that the way I sometimes describe it to hopefuls, or more commonly, panicked parents that are what do I do with my artistic child, right? Is talent. It doesn't really matter what the talent is. It could be being an amazing football player or being really good at cooking. Or talents emerge in children actually quite early if you're looking, right? And it can be something as simple as oh, this kid's really smart, or this kid can just draw. I have no idea why. They have such a great sense of color and shape. I do think that musical talent and empathetic acting talent, if you will, becomes apparent very early if you're looking for it. And there's a huge difference between innate talent, which is just like a raw, I have no idea why it sounds like this when it comes out of my face. It just sounds good and I don't know why, is the same thing as
Yeah.
I can just draw. I don't get it. And then from there, you decide sort of what you do with that, which is like, do you train it? Do you add technique to it? Do you add experience to it? And, you know, parents oftentimes too have questions of like, do I professionalize this child, or do I keep it really fun and really social and exploratory? I really loved the way my parents went about it, which is that it was never a professional thing, even though it was aiming that way. It was all
Yeah.
about training and experience, and never commodifying it or putting me under adult judgment. That was their choice, and I really, but I've also met some incredible professional actor kids that it works out great for them. So no judgment. It was just worked well for me.
Yeah.
And from there, it just kind of grew and grew and grew. It was just, I was, as long as I can remember, I was an artistic kid and an artistic person. And then kind of anticipating your next question, which is, what was my first role?
You're a good psychic there. You're not just a good singer, you're a good psychic.
I'm a good psychic. That's my other talent. So I sort of have like two answers. One is, when I was 5, I was in a ballet recital. This is a huge memory for me. I was in a ballet recital where I played a butterfly. And I remember my mom made my butterfly wings, and it was to the song that I sometimes think of, the ice skating song, like da 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 da
Yeah.
da da da. That I was just flapping around the stage with other 5-year-old butterflies, and at the end we got applause, and I was like, wow, this is great. Great. I would love to have a job where at the end of my shift, I get a round of applause. And that's what I ended up doing.
Don't we all?
Don't we all? Can you imagine being in a restaurant and everyone being like, right? But my first like part I ever played was in 3rd grade. We did a production of Annie at my school. There were no grown-ups, so it was all kids playing the grown-ups. Like we had like a 3rd grade Daddy Warbucks, and I played Miss Hannigan, and it was kind of my opus. Like I carbon copied Carol Burnett's performance from the movie, down to like the inappropriate drunkenness, and but I like really caught the bug. I was like, oh, this is my little girls at 8 years old was.
I can imagine. Yes, I can imagine.
I'm sure there's video somewhere, but to be determined.
I was about to say, they need to see the light of day. They definitely need to see the light of day. You need to get your mum to look for them or somewhere.
Exactly.
So obviously from there, obviously you went through school and everything, but from there you decided to come to one of the best countries in the world. And no, we're not talking about England. You decided to train in Glasgow, sunny Glasgow, at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. Why there?
First of all, yes, Scotland, yes. I'm still really hugely involved with the Conservatoire because it was such a huge part of my life and my development. I'm on their board. Actually, it's really, I can't even tell you how crazy it is that I'm on a board. I actually, just as a quick anecdote, we had a board meeting in New York many years ago, and I like bought a blazer, and I was on there as like as an artistic voice, not as like a corporate voice. You know what I mean? And yeah. I was like, hi, Ken, this guy that I've been talking to online like this for years. I was like, could you take a picture of me in my blazer at this board meeting? And he was like, sure. And I later find out that like Ken's the president of like Delta Airlines or something ridiculous. And I'm like, sometimes you just feel like you're pretending to be a grown-up. Anyway, I digress. How did I end up at the
We are, definitely.
So I had been to a performing arts high school as a teenager. I'd gone to Interlochen Arts Camp, which is a summer program for young artists ages 9 to 19 that are divided into sort of like primary school, middle school, high school.
Right.
And basically, students, if you will, that, going back to my original answer, are talented and crave really, really high skill and technique, tuition before college, ostensibly. They want what's in their lives, if you will. I think this is a good way to put it. In their lives at home, those things are extracurricular, right? Like you do dance after school, or you take voice lessons on the weekend, or whatever. And at Interlochen, the theory is those things become curricular, right? That you get graded on them and they're part of your overall GPA and things like that. So I went to summer camp there, and then they also have a high school that runs from age 14 to 19. So ninth grade here to postgraduate year. And I had gotten incredible curricular training there. And it was probably one of the happiest and purest times of my life as well. Just, of course, wonderful years for anybody, being around like-minded people at that age, serious-minded people at that age across the artistic disciplines, from ballet to classical music to visual art. It was really special. Only about 400 students are there. And some of my greatest friends and colleagues working in the industry today are still from that time in my life. But of course, it sort of puts you, while it sets some people up for like a very clear path to Juilliard or Rice or Royal Academy of Music or whatever it may be, when you're training an actor or a singing actor, either way, there's more options. There's more sort of like complications. If you really think about it, music in its purity, like classical music, is a lot like vocational school. I mean, I know that sounds it sounds like it's cheapening it, but it really is. You're not going to study liberal arts. You're not going to take English and calculus, and you're going to study, music theory and this and that. But there are things for actors that are bigger questions, like, how can I expand my experience of the world and broaden my worldview and increase my empathy and train my voice and train my body and understand the history of acting? There's bigger questions, you know what I mean? So a big question that I get a lot from actors is, do I go to a university and have that experience and do shows and maybe go to drama school after? Or do I go to conservatoire because I know what I want to do? And it's different for everybody. For me, I was having a very difficult time in my family life because my father, who was so supportive and so loving, and we had a wonderful family relationship, was very ill with cancer my whole childhood. And about 8 weeks after I graduated from Interlochen, from high school, he passed away. And I had all these plans to go to this American University conservatory, we call it here, in Minneapolis with the Guthrie Theater. And I just needed a break. And it had nothing to do with that program. I just sort of it was a great program. It's still a great program. I just needed to start again. And I think for me, I thought, in the face of all of this hardship and all of this fear and all this sadness, I need to have a really big adventure and really kind of shake myself up and live, in the face of death, to really have a big life experience.
Yeah.
And I did a little bit of research, and what was at the time called the Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama, now the Conservatoire, really ticked the boxes for me. It was an artistic school. I did the acting program, the classical acting program. Glasgow as a city felt like it wouldn't overwhelm me when I felt so fragile. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Unlike London, I just wanted to sort of be in a place and also have a huge cultural experience. I wanted to really learn about a new place and immerse myself in a completely different culture. And I got all of that. And I felt like Glasgow and RCS cradled me at probably the most vulnerable time in my life. And not only did that, but trained me while I was in that stage of my life. And it was the absolute right decision for me. I think, and going back to an earlier point, the thing of, it wasn't just about voice movement training, history of theater, exposing myself to playwrights and new writing and Scottish playwrights and all this stuff. It was about being in Scotland. It was about being in a different country. It was about, I had to take a Scots class and a Scots poetry class, and really just completely broadening my worldview. And I got that and then some. So it was an amazing time of my life.
Yeah, Scotland is. I'm a bit biased in this answer, but Scotland is a great country. Yeah,
I'm in agreement. So,
saying that, I don't live there now. I have moved to England, but it's still a great country, and I do love it. So you took Scottish poetry, so you learned about Rabbie Burns.
Of course, I still have Burns Night every January 25th.
Oh. So you like haggis?
I do like haggis, and a couple of years I've even made it myself.
You're more of a Scots than I am. I've never made haggis. I'll buy it.
Like, I've even been like, I've gone to the butcher and I've had him make it's, and so, not everybody eats it, but I have the experience.
Yes, and you like it. That's you're a Scots to me. We'll contact Nicola Sturgeon tomorrow and get you made a Scots. I know it is Scots.
Sounds good.
Okay. So now we'll move on.
Okay.
Sorry, apologies. We'll move on to the fans' questions. So West End Talks holds no responsibilities for the next set of questions. They come from either fans of yours or fans of shows that you have been in. Okay. We have questions from both sides of the pond. So we have some Americans that have written in, and majority of them are UK, because that's our biggest audience. But we have had some questions from the US. But our first question comes from Rebecca, and she asked, so obviously you made your professional debut, not just the West End debut, but your professional debut in the UK. What made you want to do that rather than going back to the US to do that?
I mean, easy answer. I think I had planned on going back to the US. I mean, let me put it this way, that immigration is like not a joke. Like, if you are done studying, they're like, oh, hello, women in white, look at that background. If you're done, they're like, bye. But at the time, there were certain visas where you could extend your stay in the UK for 2 years to have work experience. It was an economy stimulus plan. And long story short, I got an opportunity and I jumped at it. I mean, it was like this insane, ridiculous Cinderella story opportunity. I wasn't going to be like, I have been offered this West End leading role, but I think I'm going home. Like, I wasn't going to do that. I was 21 years old. So I think what happened, the story is kind of amazing. We, at the conservatoire, because it's a conservatoire and there's usually under 20 students, my class had 18, some programs have you audition for the shows. Like, basically they have you go through the process of auditioning for their shows and winning the roles and having the experience of preparing and getting or not getting the role and going through that experience in competition with your peers. At my drama school, they assigned the roles and kind of removed that from the experience and tacked the experience on in the final year of training, where they basically brought in a bunch of professionals to teach you how to audition. And it was for different things. So auditioning for film and TV, auditioning for Shakespeare versus a contemporary play, and then, of course, auditioning for a musical. And this was, of course, just the classical actors. So the way that the auditioning for the musical even went about happening was, it's like, should this incident never occur? Do you know what I mean? It was like, this is a piece of sheet music and it goes in it was really the basics. But I had sung my whole life and I had continued to sing and take voice lessons. And I don't even really think that the faculty knew the level at which I knew I could sing. I wasn't really leading with it, if you will. To me, it was a skill for storytelling like anything else. Like, just like dance or juggling or languages, it just felt like another way to tell stories.
Yep.
I didn't feel that I was exclusively going to exist in musical theater. It hadn't even occurred to me. So I prepared for this person. His name is Kennedy Aitchinson. I will never forget you. You've changed my life. That man changed my life. And Kennedy Aitchinson is a Scotsman who works for Andrew Lloyd Webber, and he works in the often in the pit, and is a West End pit musician and musical director, genius. He came up to teach us this class, and I'll really never forget, I sang for him for like 30, 40 minutes, and he was like, "Who are you?" And I was like,
I was like, a Scottish accent, yeah.
Thank you. And I was like, "I'm Al Silber. Hi." And was just a teeny little person. And he happened to call David Grindrod, who's a huge, the West End casting director, particularly for Really Useful Group, Andrew Lloyd Webber. And the very short version of it is 3 or 4 auditions later, maybe 6 weeks later, I was cast as Laura Fairley in The Woman in White. And I didn't even really understand what was going on. Like, I didn't really even fully understand what the West End even was. Like, no one had been like, "It's like Broadway, but like the original Broadway. It's like London Broadway." And I was like, "Oh, okay." I mean, it took me so long to figure it out. There was this part of me that was like, "What? The budget for these costumes is amazing." Like, I was totally a child, right?
Yeah.
Even when I was meeting with Andrew and we were working on key changes and Trevor Nutt, like, it was crazy. I really only knew Ruthie Henshaw, who I played opposite, because didn't we all burn a hole in the VHS of that 10th anniversary Les Mis?
Yeah.
But beyond that, like, I was just like, I'm in a play, and it's sung through. Like, I was, in it. Sometimes ignorance truly is bliss. And so, to answer that question, why did I make that decision? When an opportunity like that presents itself to you, you don't. I'm sure you could, but I did not feel I had any place to say no to that, and it changed my life. It set me on a trajectory of being in musicals. Certainly, it set me on a trajectory of having a really beautiful relationship with the West End, and I didn't leave for like another 5 years. So it was
you were in there for years.
Yeah,
you were there for years. So you got quite a few roles in the West End. You became a name. Everybody knew.
I don't know about that, but
everybody knows who you are. There's no doubt about that. Like, nice. Even back then, everybody knew who Alexandra Silber was. I knew when Robbie said that he'd managed to get you in to come in for a chat. I'm like, "Oh my God, you got Alexandra Silber?" Like, really?
That's so amazing. Because so many things happened pre-social media, it feels like maybe it didn't exist. Do you know what I mean? You're like,
did that actually happen?
If it happened before Twitter, was it real? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, this everybody knows this musical. This was this was premiere of it. It was the first time it ever happened. It was on in the West End. It was quite a big thing. It was a new Andrew Lloyd Webber, which hadn't happened for quite a while before that.
Totally.
A brand new one anyway. A brand new Andrew Lloyd Webber. It hadn't happened for quite a while. So It was a big thing. Like, it was a big thing at the time. So although I didn't see it because I was too young and I was up in Scotland, I did know about it. Like, you knew, even though there wasn't Facebook and Twitter the same as there is now, you still knew about it. You knew that it was happening, and so it was fantastic to happen, and to happen straight out of studying was even better for you. Like,
crazy. It was kind of crazy, and I sometimes look back on it now and I'm like, how did I do that? And I think one of the things that's really, I just want to like slip in a little life lesson here. So many people are like, have you ever heard the phrase, like, if I knew then what I knew now, I would never have done it?
Yeah.
Well, thank God you didn't know then what you know now, because I feel like sometimes people also say things like youth is wasted on the young. But we really have it going on between 18 and 25, because you still are like under the assumption that you're invincible and are never going to die, which makes you kind of fearless and a little cavalier in like the good way. But you also haven't gained experiences that crush your sense of possibility. So you try and do things that with wisdom, you might not try with as much heart. And I don't know. I think it's one of the reasons why I think like young people are going to like save us, because they see possibility where other people see limitations. So that's my little like PSA.
That's a very good life lesson. Yes, that's very, yeah, I can completely understand that. Unfortunately, I'm now past that. I'm out of that age bracket, but yes,
Same.
I can.
Same.
Yeah, Robbie's still.
So.
Well, thanks for reminding me there. Um, it was very life. Like obviously, we have the X. Have you heard of the X Factor?
Of course.
Yeah, so that's our when we can't be in the kids version. That's when we really like the unders. When we're in the over category, that's when we've got old.
I totally understand. Yes.
Yes, that's our one. Your version would be if you can't have audition for American Idol, because that's obviously got an age limit. So yeah, that's the kind of when you know you're old, you go, oh. Anyway, moving on. We digress. Courtney wants to know, what was it like working with Andrew Lloyd Webber on your professional debut?
Amazing. I mean, again, like I'll emphasize that I was like, I think I said something so silly like, Andrew, this is a great song. Like, I think I was like that casual with him.
Yeah.
You know, my main memory was we were working the original keys for the big ballad. There was a really like beautiful shift between the first and second year of the show, where we re-envisioned some of the concepts, and one of them was the big ballad. There's two big ballads from Woman in White that became quite popular: Evermore Without You, which is sung by the male protagonist, and the love duet called I Believe My Heart. There are a bunch of pop videos, a bunch of people have done it. And in the context of the show, in the first year, the two characters that sing it, Laura and Walter, sing it as two soliloquies out at the audience. And in the second year, we changed it so that that Walter and Laura sang it to each other. And it became this beautiful like confirmation of their love story and their feelings. And it really changed the arc of the piece, I think. And when we were doing that, we also went about changing the keys of the song. So there was a day that we were kind of playing around with all of this, and Trevor Nunn was there working on the concept. Andrew was there working on the key changes. And the actor playing Walter is still a huge West End personality. Damien Humbly is like, I think, one of the best tenors, musical theater tenors currently working today. Just incredible singer. And I worked with him also in Fiddler on the Roof after Woman in White. And so we both have sort of higher voices, and it was just clear that the song needed to move up. Andrew was so incredible about really honing in on when our voices, not only individually but as a pair, had this like ping in them when they really came alive. And we played around with it for about an hour, playing with the exchange of lyrics, Trevor commenting on what would make it a more evocative scene rather than soliloquy, and Andrew worked out the key and the key change. And it was just like, it was absolutely like being in this, to quote Trevor, he says this often, he goes, we're in the white hot crucible of creation. We were in the white hot crucible of creation.
Yeah.
We were, I know. Okay, cool. Where everybody that was there is an incredible artist, an incredible technician. And yes, some of us, you know, Damien and I were at the beginning of our careers, but perfectly suited to serve the roles that we were playing and adaptable. And it just felt like such an incredible labor of love and skill and technique and passion. And I really think that I Believe My Heart, which I do think there's like a sneaky YouTube video of it somewhere out there in the ether. I think it's so moving, and I think it's so beautiful, and it was one of the like crowning moments of, I still consider that song to be like one of the crowning moments of my career. It's just a beautiful moment. So that was like the best day with Andrew in my memory.
I can imagine. Yeah, it's just working with Andrew, and like everybody knows Andrew Lloyd Webber. Like everybody in the world, no matter whether you like musicals, whether you loathe them. Everybody knows who Andrew Lloyd Webber is and can name at least one of his productions. So yeah, obviously that's one of the...
I agree, and I think that actually one of the things, like or loathe musicals, I think one of the things that Andrew deserves the most credit for is two things that have nothing to do with songwriting. One is he changed the art form. Like, that's saying something, right? He changed the art form the way like Stanislavski changed acting, in that he took you write a story musical, like the sort of like Showboat 1927 up until all the way through the 60s till Andrew, of we're writing between 10 and 14 songs that help tell a story. And what Andrew did was he was like, I actually think that there's a crossover with popular music where some of these songs can be standalones. We get them available in the popular world. And then it's almost like the reverse jukebox thing now, which is make them popular songs that were already going to be in the context of this musical. And by the time people walk in the door, they have 4 songs that they already know from the radio. And it's creating a crossover of familiarity. And he did the same thing with the talent shows in the noughties, from, How Do You Solve a Problem Like Maria to Nancy and Joseph. Those shows, what I have to say, they obviously opinion about them was across the board. But for me, what I love about Andrew is from the beginning of his career to now, he is all about getting human beings inside and in the seats of the theater, even if they didn't think it would be accessible or available or even pleasurable for them. And how can you not see that is one of an internationally cultural contribution to humanity? That is huge. Yeah. And like or loathe musicals, like or loathe his songwriting, that contribution is completely inarguable to me.
100%. Yeah, no, we second that one completely. I'm taking Robbie. I'm just using the West End Talks name. We definitely second that one, without a doubt. He is definitely arguable. I loved. And as you said, probably the most famous version of what you said there was obviously Whistle Down the Wind, when he got boys on to sing No Matter What. Nobody, like, people like love that song. And I say, oh, do you like musical theatre songs? No, I don't like them. Or do you like No Matter What from Boys On? Oh, I love that song. Yes. It's one of my best friends. So you like musical theatre songs? No. I said, yeah, that's a musical theatre song that's been turned into a pop song. It's been changed slightly to a pop song.
And it's just the concept of story songs and the concept of that crossover exists. And to me, that's about ultimately what I think that energy does, and obviously Andrew embodies this, is like, what do we have in common versus what don't we have in common? Where can we meet? And that's what's so beautiful about a theater, is that an audience comes from completely disparate backgrounds, experiences, levels of exposure, and they have a live, living experience in this like aggregate of people that only happens that day in exactly that way. And it's magical. And if you can open people's minds to the possibility of having that experience, you're doing something for the world.
Definitely. 100%. So are you still in touch with the man himself?
Like, I only now see him like openings, and but I would obviously love to see him again anytime soon when we're allowed to.
I think we'd all love to see him very soon, anytime soon. I'd love to be in any of his theatres. I don't care which one. I would love to just be in any of his theatres. At the moment, definitely, especially the West End. Obviously, Broadway's in darkness as well. And the West End's in darkness. So yeah, definitely. So moving on, we touched on your next role in the West End, which not necessarily your exact next role. I don't know if they go completely chronologically, but the next role we're going to talk about is when you played Hoddle in this small musical. Your first time around.
That was chronologically my next West End role, so perfect.
That was just, good segue in there. So the first question about this came from Grace, and she wanted to know, what was your favourite thing about playing Hoddle?
Oh my gosh, where do I even start? I think of every role I've ever played, Hoddle has been the most dear to me and the most treasured and the most sacred. I mean, to the point where I wrote a novel about it. So I would say that It's a very personal answer. And it definitely continued in some ways in the Broadway production when I played Seidel. But for me, as I was saying about my dad passing away, he died when I was 18, and I started rehearsing for this production of Fiddler at the end of 2006, right around the 5-year anniversary. And I think what I had discovered was that it wasn't that I was in denial exactly, but I had tabled the active grieving experience because I felt this responsibility to turn out okay and become myself. And I was in the middle of a momentum, leaving high school, going into drama school, starting my career in my life. And lo and behold, I sort of woke up at 23 in the middle of this rehearsal process, realizing that I had indeed turned out okay, that I had manifested my dreams, the dreams my father and my mom had for me, and that it was now sort of time to take that box out and open it and work through it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, makes sense.
And that I felt that I was in a safe enough place to do that. And this is a musical that is literally about fathers and daughters. And this shtetl Pale of Settlement story is my story. My dad's family they're Ashkenazi Jews from the Pale of Settlement. My mom is actually Latinx, a different mixture, but I had a direct connection in my antecedents to my dad through Fiddler. And of course, in that incredible aria, Far From the Home I Love, the very last sentence that Huddle says every day to her father is, "Papa, God alone knows when we shall see each other again." And it was that scene with Henry Goodman, best actor in the world. I think about that scene as one. It's probably for me, it's one of the top 3 scenes in musical theater. I think I include the balcony scene from West Side Story and the bench scene from Carousel in that as well, all of which I've gotten to do. Can you believe it? But there's something about that's perfect theater and perfect storytelling. And it was just this gold encrusted experience of playing incredibly high level tennis with like a tennis pro so that my game was better. Like working with Henry made me better. Mm-hmm. It was very personal because it was about saying goodbye to my father. It was, I was able to sort of work through something for Alexandra that I could then use to serve Huddle and her story. And there was something also, so that scene and that song and that line became incredibly important to me. And I think it was the only character I've still ever played that just felt like me, but in a different time and place and set of circumstances. It was incredibly, incredibly entrenched in my DNA. And it's why I went on to write After Anatevka, my novel, which is sort of about what happens to Huddle and Perchik after the train scene. Like she gets on this train and then what happens? Well, I had to know. I became obsessed with it. And I went to Siberia. I did all this research. It took me about 9 years to write the book, but that is the evidence of how much it meant to me.
Yeah.
And then on a completely different side, it was probably the cast that I still to this day have the most meaningful, old, ancient, like beautiful dream come true theater friendships with. In fact, one of my best friends in the world, also on that poster just a little lower down, is Beverly Klein, who played Golda. And there she is. Yeah, you see her right here, just half the top of her name. Beverly Klein played Golda in that production, and we remained incredibly close friends this whole time. And she and I, just before the pandemic, I was about to open at the Chocolate Factory in Indecent. And Beverly and I were reunited. So she was playing the older actress and I was playing the middle actress. And it was like, oh my God, can you believe that like 14 years later, here we are.
Cool.
Oh my God. So it was just a very, very special experience. But I have to say, in the memory of the things I've done in my life, there are 3 working relationships and 3 scene partners I've had that feel like it does not get better than this. this. It doesn't. This is why I am on Earth, and doing that scene with Henry for 2 years is at the top of the list. It's like, oh, it's gold dust.
Definitely, I can appreciate that. I can imagine. Obviously, I'm not a performer, so I can't relate completely. But I can understand, and yeah, there's things that happen to everybody, whether that's acting or not, that they think this is.
I agree.
You can connect that to anything.
It's that like zingy tingle where you're like, this is why I'm on Earth.
Yeah.
No doubt, this is why I'm on Earth.
Yeah,
and
this is what I was put here for. This is what I need to do.
Yes. And there are times I think you'd agree, right? Like we all have, of course, like no matter how much you love what you do, there's always days when it's work, when it's a job.
100%. Mm-hmm.
But not everybody gets those moments. Like for some people, it's just work all the time, or it's misery, or if you are lucky enough to be in something that you love, yes, you endure the days when it's very difficult, but there's this reward of this, like I said, this gold encrusted, like, oh my gosh, I'm in the middle of my life purpose. And to be able to do that with Henry was incredibly special. And Henry's very special to me. And, just at the time, it really did feel like an incredible theatrical experience. But looking back on it, I realized that Henry was also a huge part of my healing, even though he might not have known that. Like, he was a huge facilitator to a very personal feeling that I'll always be grateful to him for.
That makes sense. Yes, I can understand that again.
Yeah.
Definitely. 100%. That's a beautiful answer. Thank you for sharing that.
It's nice to be able to talk about it.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that with us, and feeling safe enough to do that. So moving on slightly, Laura wants to know, because obviously you were in the 2007 production, and then there was a production that was on West End last year, last summer. So she wants to know, why do you think Fiddler is still such a wanted story after all these years?
Oh my gosh, such a great question. So I wish with all my heart I could have seen that production, because I had so many friends in it. And what's so funny is, going back to Indecent, the actress who played the youngest actress, there's a young, middle, and older actress, Molly Osborne, who played Seidel, was my scene partner, was my lover in Indecent. And so we called ourselves the Seidel sisters, and is now one of my greatest pals. And Judy Kuhn, the great Judy Kuhn, took over for Golda on Broadway, and then of course originated in the West End production. So I've known Judy a long time too. So wonderful cast, wonderful production. But going to the question, why does it still resonate? I think for many reasons, but two that stand out in particular. The one has to do with something global, right? Something incredibly universal about all humanity. There's something about the specificity of the oppression of the Jews in this story that I think universally expresses the oppression of oppressed people everywhere. That it discusses what it means to rail against the oppressors, right? And that the problem, and I think this is true of like almost every political movement right now, is that we so often focus on the oppressed as the people with the problem, when truly, if you think about it, the people with the problem is the oppressor, right? Like, I'll use I think you'd agree, but I'll use an example to just illustrate that's a little more open. I don't have a problem being a woman. My problem is the patriarchy that oppresses me. I don't have a problem being a Jew. I'm a very proud Jewish woman, but I do have problems with anti-Semitic thinking that limits, inhibits, and judges me and keeps me from actualizing. And I think that anybody could replace the oppression that they experience in that model, right?
I'm a gay man.
And something about Fiddler speaks to that. And I think that is a huge universal, basically, it holds us accountable as how am I oppressed? And also, how am I contributing to the oppressor and the oppression by remaining silent? Yep. And I think that right now, every time that you speak about Fiddler, it seems incredibly pertinent. And that to me is the global answer. On a micro level, I think what's really special is that it tells the story it tells that global story and presents that global theme in the context of a family in conflict. And the main conflict has to do with intergenerational shifts that always exist.
Yep.
And of course, the play itself, the piece itself, the story itself is set at the turn of the 20th century, 40 years before the Holocaust. And with no knowledge that that is coming, but knowing that anti-Semitism is prevalent. And but there's a sort of tabula rasa about that. But of course, it was written by totally secular Jews 20 years after the Holocaust in America. So we're removed, if you will, by one generation from the Europeanness of the story. And there's a lot to be said for who creates it and the lens that they put on it. But no matter what, this story resonates. It's the most popular piece of theater in Japan because Japanese older and younger generations are very much at odds about huge, very ancient, just as ancient, 5,000-year-old traditions, and young people wanting to modernize and update what their reality should be.
Yeah.
It's a very popular piece in Poland for the global issue of, you know, the long history Polish people have of being ousted and judged and Russified or whatever it may be. But I really do think that at the end of the day, the global story is universal, but it's also a universal story about a family in conflict. And no matter which story you look at, there's someone to connect with. And when you're a child, you identify with the lovers in various ways. When you're a parent, you're like, oh, it's so hard to be a parent of children that are doing different things.
Yeah.
And all of those things in relationship to each other, I think just make it an absolutely perfect piece of theater. To me, it's as universal as classic works of literature like Anna Karenina and East of Eden. Every time you return to it, the piece is the same, but the world and you are different, which supports the universality, right? The universality means like no matter when we tell the story, it'll always be relevant. And no matter when we experience the story as an individual, it will always be relevant to us in our relationship to our family and our concept of family. So I think that's the answer. And it's been an honor to sort of be in and be exposed to so many different productions and roles inside the show and see it from different perspectives. And I look forward to like Golda 2045, like bring it on.
Well, that's actually a question we're going to ask later on as well.
You know?
But touching on something you did before you moved back to America, you've obviously been back and forth since then, but one thing you did just before, Lauren asked, what was it like to play at the BBC Proms in the Royal Albert Hall?
Oh my gosh, I was actually just thinking about that the other day because the anniversary of it is coming up on the 2nd of August. Oh my goodness. Okay, so it was like without question like the biggest honor I think I'd ever had. And it was so many things. It was, you know, it was an entire West End rehearsal process. Like, I think it was 6 weeks of rehearsing not only for a completely in the round production, but also with, I think it was 14 cameras, also working out the 14 cameras and what was going to pick up what. And you get to do it once. There's no dress rehearsal. There's no second shot. There's no, like, if it goes badly, it goes badly. And it's live, and it's like, not only are there 6,000 people there, but there's 39 million people at home, and you're like, you know, I think if I had had access to it at the time, I would have been like, I've never been more medicated, but it wasn't the case. I just kind of went for it, you know, like, and also I think it was a role that I would never have like signed myself up for. The opportunity came to me and I accepted. And it's a very rare thing that also actually happened to me with Carousel. You have a very different relationship. I found you have a very different relationship to roles that are offered to you versus roles that you've gone through an audition process and like had to find it and fought for and really made a bid for it. That finding happens after the fact. And for me, I felt really young to be playing Lily Vanessa, and I felt like it was kind of out of my wheelhouse of things that I did well, meaning not necessarily vocally, it was a wonderful way to return to sort of my classical acting roots in the Shakespeare scenes. But I think I had been associating my career thus far with really weepy characters with access to lots of sorrow, having that be really, really authentic. But I knew that I was funny, and had access to anger. I had just never really utilized it in my work, let alone so publicly. So it was a lot of different challenges, and really scary. I think it's probably the most nervous I've ever been to perform. And I'm not used to that. Like, I'm used to just feeling so completely, I'm in the middle of my life purpose. It was just really a lot of things that were really different. That said, it was pure actual joy. And what I remember about the evening was it was like the night of nights. Like it was like, I mean, no wedding, no award, no Oscar ceremony was ever going to compare to that feeling of like, oh my God, just incredible aliveness. That orchestra too, John Wilson and his orchestra are, not only is John Wilson a genius and probably one of the greatest living minds in music, but every single person in the orchestra is a soloist level quality musician playing together. And so it's like this explosion of artistic bounty. And you can't believe that you're singing with them in the front. That's kind of what I thought. I was like, I'm not even just singing on this stage with these people in this orchestra. I'm singing in the front. Like, I can't believe it. It was so ridiculous. So it was just a drenching of nerves and honor and excitement. And I think I felt every single human emotion it was possible to feel on a loop within the 48 hours of that experience. And it's, to me, I'll be honest with you, all these years later, I've still never seen it because I'm nervous. I'm nervous that maybe I'm bad. Because I have such a little memory of like what I delivered.
I have.
But do you know what
I saw it live.
You did?
I saw it on the BBC, not in the theatre. I wasn't in the Royal Albert Hall. I saw it on TV. I remember seeing it. And I don't watch the proms very often, I'll be honest, because I'm not into classical music per se. I know that was a musical theatre proms, so I do watch all the musical ones. But I remember watching this and thinking, I've watched every rerun. Not that there's been many, but there has been a few reruns that the BBC have done of it, and it's absolutely fantastic. Like, the whole cast were outstanding, the orchestra was outstanding. So please, if you get the chance, watch it.
Okay,
like,
I will.
Watch it, please, because that outstanding.
But do you know sometimes that thing? Do you know what I mean though? Like when you're like, I don't want to look at my wedding photos because like, what if I look at them and then I don't know? It's stuff like that.
Bill.
But it is one of the only things I have never like gone back to because I almost don't want to mar the memory of experiencing it. And then like, what if I'm so? But thank you. I will do that, and I will let you know. I will email you with a confirmation. How about that?
Yeah. That's good. But I can completely understand because I'm the same. It's obviously a lot smaller story, but obviously I don't like watching these videos back because I hate sending them on voice. I know I'm okay at them, and my mum's told me, your mum, that's the only critic you need to worry about in life, your mother. But she's told me I'm fantastic and everything, and everybody that's watching them think, oh, it's great, but I don't like watching them back because I hate sending them on voice. So I can completely understand where you're coming from. Obviously, yours is in front of 36 million, whereas is in a couple of hundred, I think it's the most we've ever. So it's slightly different viewing figure.
It's just crazy. But regardless, it's out there. It was such an experience. I look forward to doing another one. I was supposed to see John Wilson when I was in London, but of course the pandemic. So hopefully
Miss Rona happened.
We'll reunite.
Yes. Well, we'll kind of touch on Indecent later on. We have not any questions because obviously you hadn't started it, but we'll kind of touch on that and talk about it a bit more towards the end. But coming back to this show, but a different production, you did it in the UK, so you did it in West End, and then you went on to do it, not straight away, you did a few things in between, but you went on to do it in Broadway, but as a different character. So you did it Hoddle in the UK, West End version, and you were Saito in the Broadway version. So what Paul wants to know is, what made you like decide, or what was the reason for you doing the other character?
Well, first of all, I always love when people ask this question in this way. What made you decide to, as if I'm like Kate Blanchett or something, like as if I'm theater actors get to decide what they do next. You know, sometimes you're like, who do you think I am? No. So let me put it to you this way: that they had in the Broadway production cast pretty much everybody, and we're sort of a little soft on the daughters. And I think we're having a particularly challenging time finding somebody for the oldest daughter title. And I actually thought that I had sort of aged out of the production. They at first they said they were really looking for younger people, like actual teenagers. Didn't end up sort of going that way. And one day, the audition for Seidel sort of showed up in my inbox, and I thought, oh, how interesting. And you know, you said not right away. I mean, it was like 8 years later. You know, I was a totally different person, and I had in so many different ways. So so first of all, Paul, I didn't like decide to play the different character. The opportunity presented it to myself, and I elected to take it up. So it was 8 years later, meaning I was in a completely different stage of my life in terms of my relationship to what the show meant to my grieving process. That it had, you know, taken up such an incredibly profound meaning for me about my relationship to metabolizing my feelings about grief and my father.
Yeah.
And I had largely done that. You know, I'd gotten to the acceptance stage. You know, of course, whenever someone passes away that's incredibly important to you, you have these moments where your throat catches and, you know, you miss them on anniversaries or at a special occasion or whatever it may be. But that was becoming less and less in my daily life. And of course, I feel constantly informed by that event in my life. It was, you know, life forming, of course. But I was in a different place with that. And also, Huddle is a character that is a girl who's at the onset of becoming a woman. She is about to go fulfill her dreams and her destiny. And I really see, I think, interestingly, the parallel story for me of an 18-year-old girl that gets on a train to Siberia and that 18-year-old girl that got on a plane to Scotland all those years ago. There was so much connection between those stories, you know?
Yeah,
and, you know, both of them going to follow their dreams and their destiny. For me, when I started playing Seidel, I was in a different stage of my development. I was, you know, I had grieved my father's death. I was not a girl, I was a woman, and I was thinking about my role as a woman, thinking about marriage and children, my relationship to the universe, to my Judaism, to my community. All of those things made me ideally suited to serve Seidel's story. And I realized that, like, what other person, by the way, what other human being on earth that's played Hodel has, like, done the pilgrimage to Siberia, written and published a novel about what happens to this character? Like, how much more thoroughly could I have told Hodel's story? You know, like,
no, really.
I did it, you know, there's nothing more to explore. And actually what was so beautiful was I really felt that, that totally released me from even thinking about feeling any envy or jealousy for Samantha Massell, who was playing Huddle. I was just like letting her have her experience, feeling absolute joy for her that she got to have that. No baggage, nothing. Total peace. And for me, Seidel galloped out of my heart. The development of it, the creation of it was unbelievably enriching and joyful. I loved working with the other two sisters. I loved working with Danny Burstein, and I especially loved working with Adam Cantor, who played Mothel. We had an incredibly special connection and really developed something beautiful between that double act. You know, Mothel and Seidel are the real double act of Fiddler on the Roof.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful. So yeah, I think I just discovered that I was in a different stage of my life. And as a little like, just connect, like tying a bow on that story, Art Shear, who, you know, is probably one of our greatest living directors on both sides of the pond and all over the world in his opera work, he knew that he has two daughters, right? And so he understands father-daughter relationships. And I think he really understood that for me, the most meaningful thing in the Seidel track was, of course, the wedding scene, which it would be for anybody playing Seidel. But for me, if Huddle gave me a chance to say goodbye to my father, Seidel gave me a chance to do something else I'll never have, which is be walked down the aisle at my wedding by my father and dance with my father at my wedding.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the re-choreographing of the wedding scene, Bart and our choreographer, Hofesh Schechter, who's a London-based, Israeli, but London-based choreographer, really made time for a beautiful father-daughter dance. And I thought, wow, like Fiddler has given back to me these two endemic father-daughter experiences that I wouldn't otherwise have in real life. So it was really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's nice. That's definitely, yes, you're getting me. Yes, we'll move on before because I'll be bubbling with. Yes, we'll move on. Makeup will run. The makeup will run. So Lewis asks, what's your favourite song in Fiddler?
L'chaim. Of course, obviously, they're all good, and I'm biased to Far From the Home I Love, but L'chaim has my favorite lyric in the whole musical, and I think it's, to me, such a rallying cry for a better world. The lyric, God would like us to be joyful, even when our hearts lie panting on the floor.
Yeah.
And I feel like it speaks to every adverse moment, but for some reason, particularly now. And I think I think one of the things about Judaism as a faith, as a culture, as an outlook, as just a secular celebratory way of being in the world, I think one of the things that's beautiful about Judaism is that from the jaws of absolute certain destruction and pain and suffering, there is always the ability to radically grasp at joy and awe. And that lyric embodies it for me.
Yeah, and you know how to party as well.
Yeah, and you know how to party, right? Who doesn't?
Jewish definitely know how to party. No. They definitely. Yeah. I've got one of my best friends in England is Jewish, and they definitely know how to party.
They know how to give a good party. We know what we're doing.
Yes, you definitely do. I will second that one. And the best one with Fiddler, because this is kind of tying up with Fiddler, was I was doing some research and things, and I was talking to my gran, who's on holiday with my cousin at the moment, and I said, I'm talking to this fantastic actress, she's in Fiddler. Fiddler on the Roof, what songs? And I sung If I Was a Rich Man, because everybody knows that song, the musical. And my cousin, who is 12, says, oh, this is the song that Gwen Stefani wrote. And I'm like, no, darling. Gwen Stefani did not write that song. She changed it to If I Was a Rich Girl. She changed it, but she did not write the song, no. The song was written already. But that just shows you that's another way of the kind of Andrew Lloyd Webber thing. I know it's not an Andrew Lloyd Webber musical, but taking a song and making everybody thinks it's a Spanish song when actually no, it's not, darling. It's Fiddle on the Roof. Yeah. So that was just like, it was one of those moments, you're like, really?
I know. My cousin? The young. The young.
How to be young again.
At least she knows that. I think that's great.
Yes. That's very true.
Yeah.
Ross wants to know, probably the most controversial question tonight. Okay. Who's better, UK or US audiences?
No, there's no way to answer that. There is a very distinct difference. There's no way to answer that. I'm so sorry, but I can't compare and contrast a little bit.
We talked to Ross. We thought that was the way you were going to go.
Sorry, Ross. Sorry.
What's the biggest difference then?
They're nuanced, but I think, first of all, let's just say, let me just, I think sometimes people don't necessarily even know what to look and listen for. So I'll say this. The whole point of live theater and why it's so amazing is that it not only takes place in a time, but it takes place in a place, right? It's why regional theater matters, right? When you hear about things like one of my favorite stories about such an important example of time and place and a piece of theater speaking to it is when John Doyle talks about doing Trojan Women in Sheffield after the collapse of the football stadium and when so many people had lost loved ones. And it was really centered in a community and how does a community experience grief en masse, but like with the exception of the rest of the world, and doing that production of Trojan Women that really healed the community. Like that's a great example of time, place, location, play, all coming together to really heal a community and speak to a community. So with that in mind, you know, even though we share a language, there's so many differences in terms of the cultural mores, even across the UK and America, obviously, right? One of the things I think I would say is that in general, Americans, I think everyone would agree, tend to be more direct, effusive, celebratory, outwardly emotional. And so, yes, there's more standing ovations. There's more audience interaction in terms of like absolute energy coming and pouring from the audience in a very direct way. It's less formal. It's more intense, but not necessarily better. I would just say that experience of a really present, really alive awareness of the audience being there in the room with you is much more American in my experience. However, I think I'll give you an example of a really interesting compare and contrast because I did two different productions on two sides of the pond, which is Carousel. In the UK, what I found is one, there's a much bigger history of theater belonging to every part of society in various ways. It's not as classist, even though sometimes it's attacked that way, that we have these images of the kings and queens of England sitting in the globe and all of the punters sitting standing in the stalls for a penny.
Yeah.
And we all watch theater together, and that's a very, to me, when I think of the UK, that's how I think of the theater, that everybody gets into the theater somehow. And what I find really interesting is that there is more formality. There is a very different relationship to directly expressed emotion, in that it's less effusive and much more personally experienced. And I'll give you a great example, I think, of a compare and contrast within the same play. So as I was going to say, when I did Carousel in Los Angeles, which I did after the UK, but I'll start with it because I think it's just an easier example. It was Carousel is a very complicated, thorny piece of theater. It's incredibly important, incredibly relevant, incredibly nuanced, with obviously an incredible score. In Los Angeles, I think the themes that led had to do with the class and domestic issues between the couples and between the characters. Who's an economic winner? Who's an economic loser? Who's a good guy? Who's a bad guy? It was very, very much about the social issues, right?
Yep.
And Los Angeles, of course, has huge social crisis almost always occurring. And that was very clear that was what was being brought out in the production, but also what the audiences were responding to, right? Mm-hmm. So there was one very bizarre, I shouldn't call it bizarre, I suppose it was a very honest reaction. There was one night when Billy Bigelow, spoiler, when Billy Bigelow dies, the audience applauded. I know. And you sort of go, wow, like, it's such an unbelievably honest comment. And to me, very, very interesting. So it was the social issues were what reigned there. And I think that speaks to what I was sort of talking about. In England, there was no doubt in my mind that the issue and the theme that resonated with people in the UK had to do with a couple very, very clearly in love with each other and emotionally connected and profoundly, almost spiritually in love, with no ability and no socialization to give them permission to express that love to each other, to their peril. And that these two people so in love never said they loved each other while they were alive. And I think that is a huge if you will, UK social crisis about emotional expression, that emotional expression getting trapped inside British people in some ways mars them, and that emotional expression is considered to be weak, and that vulnerability is considered to be weak, when actually vulnerability takes incredible strength. That theme was the theme that destroyed people. And it was really, to me, a very interesting comment on, it's a much more nuanced theme, but no less powerful.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That was a long answer, but...
There's no long answers in this show, don't worry. No long answers. Every length of answer is correct. But that was not a very good answer, definitely. So our last two questions from the fans.
Okay.
The penultimate question, that's a big word for me on a Monday, comes from Robert, and he wants to know, what advice would you give to someone in training?
Oh, such a good question. Okay, so there's like, I could talk for like 3 hours about this, but okay, I think if I were to just give one piece of advice out of the bazillion things I could say, I think the number one thing that I have learned over the years is that success, which I think society has told us has to do with money, fame, notoriety, status, all of those conventional things that both history and contemporary society support with followers and money and whatever, fame, are not long lasting. And that if this is the soundbite. Success is not about what you do. It's about how you feel about what you do. And I think that is actually true of anybody, right?
Yeah.
That if you're a lawyer and you hate what you do, you're never going to feel successful, as opposed to somebody who goes, okay, like, I'm not a big fancy, finance lawyer, but I work in civil rights, and every single day and every single person that I achieve freedom for, I'm a success, and I'm contributing to, like, it's completely about what your values are. And I'll support this by saying, I've sung at the proms on BBC. I've worked with Angela. I've done incredibly fancy things in my life that I kind of can't believe have happened to me. And I remember having this feeling, I've subsequently had it several times, but in 2012, I was doing a brand new musical. It was super weird. It was a one-woman musical called Arlington. Actually, it's the whole show, the entire show from top to tail, is on Spotify. We recorded every piece of music and dialogue. If you look it up, it's just me and my incredible singing pianist on this little 70-minute story. It was incredibly bizarre, incredibly beautiful, incredibly different. And I could tell it was really having an effect on the audience and in the community. I think I was making like $200 before taxes. I was losing money doing the show. I was in the middle of nowhere, New York City, like in the 30s, in this tiny little theater, ostensibly slumming it for art, right? And I remember one day walking home from the show, feeling like I had been hit by this ton of bricks on my head, and I went, oh my God, I am a success. Like, I love this. I am so in awe that I get to do this every day. This is success. This isn't about doing it in front of 39 million people for the BBC, or doing it in the West End, or doing it on Broadway. Sometimes it's about going, I feel so good about this. And the only way that you're going to be able to know that is if you know what your values are. And so asking yourself, like, what really matters to me? Why am I here? What do I value? What do I stand for? What do I stand against? Knowing the answers to those questions are going to help guide you to being in the middle of that feeling. And that's my advice to not only people in training, but like people everywhere.
Anyone. And no matter what you do. Like, I think that's very good advice for anyone, whatever, as you said, whatever profession. More so musical theatre, because that's also what we are based on. I don't think a lawyer's going to sit there and watch it without background to musical theatre, but whether it be a fan or a performer, but I think regardless, like,
no matter where you come from, it's universal advice. I think it serves true of relationships. I think it serves true of anything, and it takes all kinds to make a world, but I really do believe that if you wake up in the morning feeling invigorated by what you spend so much of your life putting the axe to the pickaxe to, like, you're going to feel better about being here, and you're going to be more productive, and you're going to, be a better contribution. I believe that. So it's not about what you do, it's how you feel about what you do.
So basically I'm a success then, because I'm loving this.
Indeed.
I am loving doing this. So
Indeed.
it's not a massive success, like popular as the what is it, the generations,
conventional success.
Yeah, conventional success. It's not massive, but I'm enjoying it. So yeah, so
I think it's all that matters.
Definitely. And our last question comes from Tony with an I, so female Tony. Not that matters, but I just thought, and she asks, if you had to go into any musical currently, so we'll use, obviously that's pre-lockdown, because obviously there's nothing currently on Broadway or the West End, which musical would it be and who would you play?
Oh, good questions. Currently.
So yeah, currently pre-lockdown.
I would love to play Bobby in the gender swapped company.
Oh.
Would love to do that. I think I would crush that. And on a slightly old school, I think it's time for my Carlotta. Don't we agree?
Yeah.
Don't you think it's Carlotta time?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to put that out in the universe. Both sides of the pond. I'm ready. I'm ready for the high notes.
Preferably our side. No offense to Broadway.
Or why not both? Why not both? Start there, move to Broadway, go back and forth. Why not?
But that's a bit biased, because we are West End.
That's right.
I think.
I think those would be the musicals, yeah. And of course, I would love to go back to my West End hopeful play in the West End. So that would also be a wonderful thing to return to.
Oh yes, yes, because that's actually a good segue. It's a good segue, because obviously that's us now finished the questions. But I was going to mention, obviously, you have mentioned it, but you were supposed to start in a play in our darling West End, in the UK, before Miss Rona decided to hit, and lockdown happened. Yes, and you had to sadly go home. But hopefully, we're not looking for any information. Obviously, you don't know what's going to happen or that. But hopefully, fingers crossed, somebody there will be that run at some point.
I do think that the Chocolate Factory and all of the enhanced producers, the production had 2 preview performances that were so sacred. And actually, a couple people have written to me being like, I was there. You're like, did it even happen? They have every intention, barring utter disaster and things, of simply picking up where we left off when it's safe to do so. And when that happens, I'll be on the first flight back. So
and when that happens, I'll be in the first show.
Yeah. I think, and all of us are still in touch. We're all on this WhatsApp group, still in touch, still having Zoom meetings. And it was just a very special and sacred experience. And obviously going through the coronavirus experience with those people was so unique. And I really do hope that we get to tell that story, because it's a beautiful story and it's a beautiful production, and the cast was unbelievable. So I am putting out in the world that when it is safe to gather together again, that company will reassemble and reanimate, and we will tell that story again.
Good. I would look forward to that. I will be been at the Chocolate Factory many times, but can't wait to go and see you there and to go back. So what we'll move on to now is the not so quick fire round. So all our West End Talk fans will know this round. It used to be called the quick fire round, but you're going to find out why it's now not called that. Because it's the hardest questions you've faced tonight. It's more about Alexandra than the parts that you've played in the past. So the first question in this section is, what would be your dream role? So if the director said to you, you could have any role you want, it doesn't have to be musical theatre, it can be opera, it can be whatever, plays, whatever, regardless of age or race, not gender. We'll come to that one.
Okay.
What would it be?
Oh man.
This is why we changed it to not so quick fire round.
Desiree Armfeld.
Oh, that's a good one.
I think it's in my future.
Yes.
And can I have a play answer as well? Can I do musical and play?
Yeah, of course you can. Of course you can.
Play would be Cleopatra.
Oh. Yes. Yeah.
So I'm manifesting that.
Both could actually be in your future, so yes.
Yeah. So I definitely have one that's passed me by, which is Little Red Riding Hood in Into the Woods. I feel like I had a lot to say about her, and am sad that I will likely never play her. Like that felt like a very.
You don't know. There might up until last year there wasn't a female Bobby in company, so you never know.
You're right. You never know. But yeah, that was definitely a character that I have a lot to say. I have a lot to say about her. But yeah, I think Desiree. In terms of musicals, and I also think I have a Mama Rose in me, but even further down the line.
You're slightly too young for that one at the moment. Yes, but that's one to keep in mind.
We're cornering it. Yeah, those are my answers. So Cleopatra, Desiree. Yeah.
They're good answers, definitely. So, same sort of question, but what would be your dream gender reverse role? So that is a role traditionally played by a male.
Sweeney Todd. Easy.
Oh.
How is that not everyone's answer?
I know.
I mean, I don't even want to talk about it. Like, done.
I can completely understand. We don't need a reasoning behind that. We completely understand why that would be. Yeah. I have never seen a bad performance of Sweeney Todd ever, amateur or professional.
Community theater.
Yeah, there's never been a bad performance, and I've personally seen. There may have been, but I've never seen one.
I never saw it. Seen. No. That's it. Like done.
That's finished. That was easy. I think that was the easiest, apart from a few of the males who say alphabet. I'd say they kind of. A lot of the males go, yeah, I'd love to do alphabet. I'm like, no, think outside the box. Like, don't go for the easy answer. You know what I mean? Like, every male wants to do alphabet. You know what I mean? Like, realistically, I don't sing, and I'd love to try alphabet. You know what I mean? So anyway, the hardest question of the night, and you can only pick one. Okay. Before I ask it, what is your favourite musical theatre song? Now, it doesn't have to be one you've performed. It can be, but it doesn't have to be.
This is going to be a funny answer. I think my favorite musical theater song is Maybe from the musical Annie.
Oh.
Not only is it a beautiful song, like not only is it a just beautifully constructed, beautifully written song, there's something about it that has to do, the lyrics, of course, it's a young orphan singing about wanting a home, right? And imagining what her life could be like. I just think it speaks to a universal longing to be loved.
Yeah.
And it speaks to something so pure. And the fact that it comes from a child accesses that purity. And that earnestness married with the melody is, I just think it's the most beautiful song. It's one of my favorite songs to sing. I sing it as an adult in concert from that adult place. And sometimes I also think about it like in terms of, I adopted a cat 6 or 7 years ago, who's like the light of my life. And I think, all those animals at the shelter must have the same longing, just with no ability to express it. And they just want a home. They just want to be loved. So yeah, I think it's very universal. I think it's my favorite song.
That was a curveball. Very good curveball. Yeah. Curveball. It was a very good one. Yeah, I can completely. I love Annie. Annie's a fantastic.
Martin is and I think obviously an incredible composer. Just doesn't get the sort of like reverence that Sondheim and Rodgers and Hammerstein get. And if you really deconstruct his work, it is incredibly complex and advanced and deep and beautiful music. I sometimes also think that songs that are about bigger things, huge life-shifting themes, like with huge orchestrations, it's not that I have anything against it. It's just that sometimes simplicity does it. Just speaks to something so true. And there's something about that song that's just a cry from the deepest part of all of us, our child self, the universal longing to be loved and seen and have a home.
That's a great answer. Yes. Again, you're coming out with the great answers. I'm loving it. You're giving me an easy job. It's like, yes, that's fantastic. Great. Where do we go from here? How do I answer this? Anyway, last question of the night.
Oh my gosh.
What? Yeah, we're there. We've got one thing after that, but the last question that we're going to ask you is, again, it doesn't have to be shows that you have been in, but it can be. But what is your top 5 shows? Now that doesn't have to be. Oh
my gosh, it's so hard.
Any theatre whatsoever.
Okay.
It can be in no particular order.
West Side Story.
Yeah.
And then like everything else. West Side Story. Fiddler on the Roof. Gypsy. Merrily We Roll Along. And what is 5? I know I'm missing something good. And Carousel.
Just 5 classics there. 5 classics. And we were supposed to get Carousel in this year.
You were?
We were, yeah, in the Regent's Open Air Theatre. We're getting it next year. It's been confirmed.
You'll get it next year. I'll be there cheering them on. I also think West Side Story is just like sort of a freak of nature piece. It being on the San Francisco Symphony recording was like maybe the greatest thing I've ever been a part of, and it makes you appreciate that in a funny way. Like in isolating the music, you see the power of the drama, you see the power of the dance, that there's just something about each of the disciplines, including the orchestra itself, is operating at peak artistic capacity. Yeah. And it's just an incredible freak of nature thing. But the other pieces I listed, I think, are also just no fat on the storytelling, absolute epochs of not only storytelling through music, but also the concept of structure and universality. Just, I don't know. Those are the ones.
Yeah, and relevant stories. They're all still relevant to this day.
Indeed.
No, that they were written years ago. But before we go on, I'll mention one further thing about the Symphony Orchestra recording of West Side Story. But before I do that, I do have an apology to make to somebody. At the opening of the show, I did say that you were our first Broadway star. Throughout this chat, I have thought we did have Christina Bianco on, yes, who has been on Broadway. So just in case she's watched, I do apologise. I didn't mean to miss you out. But Christina, guarantee 100%.
She is.
Yes.
I'm still honored to be number 2. No worries.
Yes. But you are the first of one thing, and I can 100% confirm this. You are my first ever discussion, never mind just West End talk, with a Grammy nomination. You've had a Grammy nomination.
It's crazy. You know what's funny though? I don't feel like I'm any different. And I've almost felt like sometimes once that Grammy nomination came into my life, I would walk into an audition, still auditioning. I'd walk into an audition room and be like, are they going to expect that I sound like a Grammy nominee? Like, and get all nervous. It's such an unbelievable honor. And it was also Cheyenne Jackson who played Tony on that recording. And I actually sang at the Grammys. Like, what? Incredible experience. And just, I don't know, I think sometimes you have these experiences where you go, I can't believe that was captured. I can't believe that recording will outlive me. It will outlive any children I have, grandchildren I have. It'll always be here. I'll be part of the link of the West Side Story recordings evermore. And it was truly like the greatest honor of my life. And it's something I'll never forget. And in a lot of ways, I feel like me operating at the peak of my abilities, and it's just such a thrill. So, and anytime I can come back to sing with that symphony or to reunite with Michael Tilson Thomas, the conductor of that album and of San Francisco Symphony for 25 years, is a joy. So crazy times, crazy. It's crazy to have woken up in the middle of my life and gone, I guess I've done some things. Because sometimes you're just like watching Netflix with your cat and you feel like a normal old person,
Yeah. That's what I've been doing, not with a cat because I don't have a cat, but yeah, they're watching Netflix like an old person is what you've been doing for the last 12 weeks, 16 weeks, however long it's been.
Exactly.
Well, we all feel you there, definitely. But you're in amongst a small group of Grammy nominations as well, because there's not been many musical theatre nominations, so you're one of the few that have had one for musical theatre. Obviously that wasn't the nominee, it wasn't the Grammy you were up for, but it was musical theatre you had done to get that. So there's not many people that can say that.
Thank you, Graham.
So yeah. So congratulations from me. I know it's a massive thing. It's a thing I'll never get, like Grammy nomination. Yeah, I'm getting one in next year's Grammy. I'm a nomination for next year's.
Amazing.
We're going to win a BAFTA for this. That's us. We are at the end. We have made it. The last thing before you go, have you heard of the Ice Bucket Challenge?
Yes.
You have. Don't panic, we're not going to make you do it. Okay? There's two reasons.
I don't have any ice on hand, so.
There's two reasons I asked that, or ask that question. The first one is just to see the reaction of people, because it's priceless. Okay. And the second one, when you did it, I think it was ASL for America, wasn't it? It was the charity ASL. You did it, and you had to nominate the person to do it next.
Yes.
And that was the whole point in it. So what we've come up with is the West End Talks nomination. So we're going to ask you to nominate somebody to do one of the next chats. And that can be anyone from theatre, film, or TV. Minimum of one, but you can nominate as many as you want. The whole point of it is you know them, because the whole point is to bring them in, to try and help us bring them in. So who would you like to nominate?
I would like to nominate Damien Humbly.
A fantastic choice.
Thank you. I would like to nominate Damien Humbly, my 2 times West End scene partner. And like I said, I think one of the greatest singers alive working today, and such a great body of work, and a great guy, a great interview. So much fun.
That was fantastic. So
that's my nomination.
Fantastic. So what we need you to do now is go onto Twitter after this chat, pop up a tweet to say you've just done your talk with West End Talks. Damien, and now it's your turn. So tag us both in it.
Done.
Brilliant. So that's us. All that's left for you guys at home to remember is the charity. Me and Alexandra's not just here for fun, although we had great fun, I'm sure. But we're not just here for fun. We're here to try and raise some much needed funds for Acting for Others. They're a fantastic charity that helps all the acting community, not just at the moment, but more so at the moment because theatres are in darkness, and the theatre world isn't making money. So please, anything you can donate, we do help. We do steal Tesco's line. Every little helps, and the bio's in the link. The link's in the bio below, so please donate if you can. I know times are hard for everybody. And join us next time when we'll have A musical that I don't know if you've heard of. It's a brand new musical. It's just gone to the West End the beginning of this year, or the end of last year, sorry. It's Anne Juliet.
It was at the Shaftesbury.
It is at the Shaftesbury, yes. It's currently, well, I say currently, it will be reopening in the Shaftesbury once the theatres reopen. So we have Tim Mahendra, who plays Francois. So he's joining us next time. So join us then and we'll ask him all your questions. But once again, Alexandra, thank you very much. It has genuinely been a joy. It has genuinely been a joy. So thank you very much for joining us.
So much.
Yes. Take care, guys. Bye now.
Bye.
L'chaim to life. Here's to the father I try to be.
Here's to my bride to be.
Drink l'chaim to life, to life.